Howdy, howdy, everybody. Welcome to EduTALK. EduTALK, as you know, is a weekly virtual talk show created out of the need for a global learning community focused on topics in education directly impact Caribbean nations and diaspora nationals working across the globe. EduTALK features teachers, principals, students, administrators, business leaders, and dignitaries who share their expertise on critical topics facing education today with the common goal of moving education forward and our students upward. I am your host, Dr. Dwayne Dyce, and I'm joined by my co-host here, Dr. Megel Barker, alongside one of our wonderful guests who has been on the program for a while too. I haven't seen her in a while on here, but she has been on a few times. She is Mrs. Judy Villeneuve-Dyce, and we are here. We're gonna talk a little bit, but I want Dr. Barker just share a few words as usual. Tell people, what's going on over there in England, and then we'll get Judy to introduce herself as well. And we'll introduce our topic.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Dice. I think there are many educational talk shows around the world, but there are very few that spans the Atlantic. We
Yes.
have two oceans that have an ocean, the distance apart, but we unite, right, despite the distance. Always great to have Judy. We know that Judy is on her doctoral program as well and wanting to research and continue to add value to herself so she can add value to the things that we do. So it's three the hard way, or three the best way, or three musketeers discussing education. So it's always nice having Judy on because she brings a perspective of actual implementation of policy, which sometimes, when we're talking about it from the, people who are implementing, the people who are actually writing these policies, it's great to see the perspective that is taken. So as usual, we hope our viewers and our listeners and our fans, enjoy the conversation and share, like, and subscribe so that more people can hear the message and be a part of the conversation. So,
Yeah.
yes,
Yes.
beautiful weather here in England.
Oh yeah, we have beautiful weather too here in New York. It's
Yeah,
really nice. Yeah. Judy.
yeah,
Yes, it is always a pleasure to be on with both of you, of course. The brains on this program are, it's an honor to be a part of any discussion that you two are having. And yes, it's the whole policy idea of that we bring to education is so critical, and it's something where people fall short in a lot of cases in not only understanding, but in writing and implementing. So it's a critical part of education. So
Okay.
I'm really excited about our topic today and being
Yeah.
able to discuss, all the various aspects of education that are upon us.
Yeah.
Especially now that the Queen has passed, it makes me think of the fact that our entire educational system, those of us who are educated as a result of being part of the former colony, that particular decisions were made around what the role that we should play in the world, based on the history that we have with, that country. So it's a great time to reinvent ourselves and our understanding of ourselves also around what we want to learn for ourselves, not what's designated to us from, the people that we have been inherited by, So it's an exciting time for us, I think.
Yeah. So nice segue into our topic introduction here. Tonight or this evening, Tuesday, Eastern time, we are talking about it's education as a national investment for any country, or education as a social service, or both. How do we see it? And we are going to kind of like debate this topic a little bit to look at it. Is this a national investment or a social service? And to start us off, I want to get the brains in here. Dr. Barker, you want to set us up looking at the two topics. And remember, guys, you can just comment below in the chat. And you can also share any ideas that you have, because this is very opinionated. And we're going to pull from different ideas that we have seen, we have lived in, we have been educated in, and see if we can facilitate this this debate or discussion around the idea of education. Is it a national investment, or as a social service to people? All right, Dr. Barker.
Yes, thank you, man. I think it's that's putting me on the spot now. Next time you warn me about what we're talking about.
Okay.
So, but all of what's happening at the moment back home in Jamaica with the start of the school year is a big question, though, isn't it? Whether it is supposed to be seen just as a social service or whether it is a national investment. And when we're talking about investment, I'm thinking of it as an investment in the hope that it can lead to a prosperous future, economic security in that sense. So that's interesting. I think in the context of the debate that we're having now, and if we look at it with the terms that are around it, like brain drain, the only way we can discuss, there are two ways we can look at it. But when you look at the brain drain, it becomes a question about whether education and the investments that's going into education, whether we're getting the returns from that investment. Because if we're in a situation where most people are educated in Jamaica, let's say for about 9 years compulsory, and most people will go on to the other 2 to finish up to grade 11, the numbers fall off, we know. But let's say a person has gotten to degree level, degree level in Jamaica, finished their degree, or finished teacher training, if we want to be specific, would have spent about 12, maybe about 15 years benefiting from what is a tax subsidized education for the most part. Mm-hmm. And if those people leave and go to work in another country, but start from the point where they begin to provide value, because we have to assume that after they complete that process, they have a value to provide. And so when they reach, let's say, the USA or UK or any of those first world countries, which are already advanced, mm-hmm. but they go straight into the education system and begin to add value. The question mark now is, what are we losing from our system, and what are those systems gaining free of cost? So I have a real issue with that, and I stand as a hypocrite on that, because I was educated and left Jamaica in 2002. Mm-hmm. But looking back, and I've tried to rectify that with the work that we're trying to do with the diaspora. I try to say, can I give back? And maybe that's a conversation we can have. What do we balance that? Mm-hmm. But to answer your question, I see it more as a national investment. And so when the government puts money into education, I'm expecting to see a return. Now, some investments are services, but I think if we start to look at it as an investment into securing the economic future of the country, then we might be able to approach it in a different way.
Cool. Yes, that's a good setup for us here. Is it a national investment, and how do we view investment in terms of education? And then for social services, like what is it as a social service? Judy, let's hear your take on it.
So I'm going to just scale out a little wider on the topic. The concept that I'm going to try to introduce is the idea that we are, in fact, world citizens, in the sense of it is a consequence of the unfortunate circumstances around slavery that our diaspora nationals have been distributed throughout the world. It's both an advantage and a disadvantage in a sense, because we tend to lose the connection that we have to our original identity in some senses, and we get the countries that we go to get the benefit of whatever it is that, that core cultural commitment to education and progress, right? They're getting very hardworking people all around the world coming from Jamaica. And so what we have to realize is that when we compare our nation to other developing nations, let's say Nigeria, India, and China, what they've been able to do is also just not obviously through slavery, but just deliberately distribute themselves around the world in a very strategic way, but simultaneously develop themselves at home. So in the last 50 years, if you look and see the incredible development that has taken place in these three countries in particular, again, India, China, and Nigeria, you see that they have, I guess you could say, been able to balance the two. Whereas in Jamaica, while we have excellent educators and just professionals in a variety of areas around the world, our country has not improved, right? Because the priority on ensuring that the people that remain there are living in a way where it's safe, where they're being fed, where there's a certain comfort level, economic development from home. And when I look at at China and India in particular, a lot of the industries that they've gotten into, like technology industries, what they've been able to do is they've been able to do it from home. So a lot of they have actually created an alternate market where, yes, some are living around the world, but there are some that are living there, undercutting the cost of other competitors in those industries, and actually living extremely well in their country, despite the low value in the dollar that they have. I mean, it's even increasing the dollar, and developing really a nice middle class community. In Jamaica, we can always say that we still have a very bifurcated society. We have people who have a lot of money, people who have very little money, and we still have a lot of problems around, safety, right? For sure. There are a lot of things that we need to make sure that are happening in our country so that we can continue to have the improvements and make the impact in the world that we've been making. And that's where my concern is. It is definitely, to answer your question, an investment. Our people are an investment. They've done a lot. We want them to continue to do a lot. And by denying them that opportunity, by not maintaining at least some groundwork, right, as far as their development, we're ultimately destroying our society, our foundation. And no matter how many countries we go to, that's our country. You can, no matter, and I know you guys know this, no matter what country you go to, it doesn't feel like home.
Yeah,
It's not
that's what
home.
what you said. What you said.
Yeah,
No
it's
matter
not
where
home.
you go in the world, I am a Jamaican.
Exactly. And you want to feel at home. When you go home, you want to have your own country. And that's the problem that some of, our African nationals who have been separated from their country don't have. They have to suffer in the circumstances that they have there and make do. We don't have to do that. We need to ensure that our citizens that are coming up are going to have an opportunity. And that we have a place to go back to where we can be safe while we invest in other ways of learning and bringing them back to our country as well, and just benefiting from having an international society. We are global citizens. We definitely, it's not a problem to travel and to live other places, but we have to maintain our home. We have to
Yeah.
maintain our source, where we come from.
So between all you and Barker here, we're looking at the idea of kind of like providing human resources for our parent country. Even if you have brain drain, it wouldn't be so detrimental to the parent country, because you have a system in place that you're taking care of the resources in this country, that that people are going to leave. People are moving all over the place, but we're in the parent country, that you have a really solid background. So my idea is, when I listen to you guys talk, is it that you have to make sure that the middle class, if you're looking at education as an investment, that you take care of the middle class, because that's what the backbone of a country is. If you're looking at investment, is it that you're taking care of the middle class of the country? That if you take care of the middle class, then it will trickle down to low-income families, and they're having services. So that's where the service comes in. That is a social service for these people who actually who are low-income people. And so in their communities, that we provide educational opportunities. And there's a nice word, access to these functions in education. And so if we take care of the middle class, then we're actually investing in education, because by investing in the middle class, we actually protect the backbone of the country. And then we look at Okay, let's look at the educational infrastructure. So from the middle class, you're looking at what is it that runs this country very much so that you will not collapse as a system, and whatever the middle class needs, then you provide that for them in this country, and then of course the upper class people will take care of themselves. Is it that we're focusing on the middle ground there in terms of
Let me no. From a while back, nursing was where this used to happen. A lot of nurses, a lot of these countries used to come to Jamaica to recruit nurses. And before teachers used to do this, it was nurses. In the 90s, you'd hear of many nurses that would just travel overseas and work in those systems, National Health Service, the US system. Teacher migration on this scale is a relatively new phenomenon. The idea of teachers leaving Jamaica and going to live this mass migration. And I don't know if you will be able to remember this, but in about 2000, when Bertrand Whiteman was the Minister of Education, there was a moment in the Jamaican education system where it overproduced, or that's what the Ministry of Education said, that they needed to put 300 plus teachers on what you call it, what was it? The term they used wasn't leave, but they weren't able to find places for them in the educational system. So at the time, it seems like our teachers' colleges were overproducing, and that message got out into the global, at the time globalization was coming on. So by about 2001, 2002, 2003, the British government, the Canadian government, and the US government, many of the states, I won't say the government, the states, recognized that they could come to Jamaica and recruit teachers. Because the message coming out was, we had too many teachers for the number of spaces that we had. So the genesis of this is very important. Before that, the average Jamaican might migrate and find a job, and that wasn't an issue. What happened though was that we kind of opened the door in early 2000 to say, you are free to come to the country and recruit. At that time, what the a strategic approach to it would have thought about what would be the long-term impact if this continued over time. But at the time, it didn't seem to me like the government understood these far-reaching impacts. They were quite short-term, obviously. Remittance would come back, people would be better off, there'd be less issue. This was an issue that they had anyway. They were laying off teachers at the time. So it was it solved itself. But what they didn't see was that these countries are actually quite predatory. And they can see that it's much cheaper for them to come and give us a starting salary for free, but don't have to pay any of the cost of educating us. And I think if we're going to talk about this now, and you want to get I know I want to pass on to Judy, and Judy have a point as well to make on this. But if we need to think of this as an investment in people, then the government needs to think about at what point in any investment do they begin to draw those returns. And if anywhere in the middle of that, someone says, I am going to leave the system because of this free pathway to go and work, what safeguards are in that system so that we can recoup some of that investment? Otherwise, we're constantly digging a hole. And as you're digging over the hole, another person is throwing back dirt into the hole. So two of you digging, and it's sometimes more happening. So that's really the problem we have here. It's a brain drain. We cannot stop our brain drain, but we're actually having a brain drain that is institutionalized, and that's a worse form of brain drain. Now, in a solution, because it's institutionalized, the potential is there for the government to find a way to control this migration or this rape of our talent overseas, because it's not a thing that's happening in the New York Education System Board to say, oh, we're randomly. They sit there and go, we maybe can get another 300 teachers from Jamaica to fill the gap. And they go for it. It's not a random thing. So and the UK government doesn't go, oh, it's done because that's a way in which they also provide value to their education system. So I have a lot to say on the history of this, I have a lot on that, but and what we can do to solve it. But Judy, I know you have a point.
Oh boy, I tell you, you're absolutely right, 100%. In these developed societies, the government is very strategic. All of this is a plan. They demonstrate their priority on education. They have a certain amount of money. The money that they have is for a certain number of people. They're constantly looking for the best deal. However they lead you to believe that they feel about you. The fact is when they're willing to hire you, they know your value. However, they also know the desperate situation your country is in. So they've always had the advantage, or they've ensured themselves the advantage, right? By keeping the dollar weak in our country and our desperate need for these opportunities. But they also know that we come in and we do a great job, but they can get three of us for the price of one.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem actually stems from our own understanding of our own value. See, we're not, when I think about my mother, for example, she left Jamaica not because she wanted to, it was because of the opportunities weren't there that met her talents. And a lot of, I'm sure it happened with you guys as well. You get to a point where you know your value, you know what you can offer, you know what that's possibly out there that you can get, you know what your ambition is, and you have enough information about what opportunities are out there and you go and get it. However, what we need to understand is our own value. The government needs to support the value that they have in their own educators. And we could become a train the trainer country as well. If you guys value what we do so much, let's turn this into an economic benefit for ourselves. We speak English clearly enough for Google to have a contract with us. Clearly, it's not a language barrier. We have to monetize our own talent. And that's something that we haven't thought of. Again, not to beat a dead horse, but we have a post-colonial mentality. We think that what jobs that we get are to fill roles of larger organizations, usually in other countries. We're not thinking about developing our own industries and creating opportunities for ourselves. We're constantly going out to get opportunities. So this is part of the long-term plan that you see other countries have for themselves. This is part of what government policy should include. What are we looking to develop in our own nation and in our own citizens that are of value to us, and that we can dictate the price when we do leave? Because what's happening is we have all these individuals finding out from their friends, oh, this group, this company is hiring, this school is hiring, and they're all bringing them in at these dirt cheap levels because they're working on their own. The government, as you said, Dr. Barker, can dictate, hey, we're managing this, we're negotiating the price that people get paid, and we're also dictating the number of years that you have them and the price, the salary that goes up, because we know those people are going to pay back into remittances here. We know that those remittances and all of the money that they save, ultimately, we love our country, it's going to come back to our country. But what's happening is they go there, they get very low costs, they're spending their money in that economy and not really having enough money, honestly, to be able to come back in most cases and develop our country. And they end up staying there for long periods of time, right? And then suffering all the indignities of not being, a real member of that society. Because mind you, they're going on visas, they're not going with citizenship in most of these instances. And that is also another ball and chain relationship that they have with the country, where, again, they're using us to their advantage, and we aren't able to collect enough to have our own advantage. So we need to help these people if you're going to transition, because they are. Honestly, people are spread all over the world. This idea of brain drain, it's so normal for countries that are developing to spread themselves around and to get opportunities for themselves. There's no problem in that. The problem is that when they don't have anything to go back to, and there isn't a government plan to develop where they can come home to, like when Dr. Dyce and I were in Dubai, a lot of Indians that we met there, they said they don't want to go back home because there's some areas where they're from where there is no plan for them. So it's easier for them to stay out. We need to come up with a plan, of the government that is, of Jamaica, that makes people want to come home. And when they do come home, they're safe, because we don't have a middle class. It's not that we need to take care of the middle class. We need to develop a middle class. We need to develop a middle class that has prioritized its education, that has enough money to invest in the country, and it doesn't have to fear for their own safety and their own property and being kidnapped and all the
Yeah.
other things that are happening. Because the only definitional difference between middle class and low class is the low class people that we're talking about haven't met their basic needs. They aren't secure. They aren't safe. They don't have the money they need. They don't have the food that they need. So they become internal predators, right? We need to help them build up what they need, a basic security, right? So that we can all thrive. That would be the best goal.
So we need a comprehensive system then of investment and services for those people who are there. But I think, Barker, I'm going to hand over to you in a little bit. I want to highlight a point here that I heard too from when you mentioned the three countries, China, India, and Nigeria, Judy. I thought of the idea of raw material, and we have raw material in Jamaica. We have raw material, we have land. We can export as much agricultural products as possible. We have raw material in terms of human resources, because we're pulling out, as Barker said, we're just pulling out teachers, trained teachers who are very, very educated and sophisticated, and that is why other developed nations are becoming this predator on Jamaica to get teachers in their system, more than almost trained teachers, more than any other system, and cheap too, because they keep the dollar low. So I'm thinking, if it's an investment that we're looking at for education, we should probably spend some more money in the education system to make sure that it's very robust, that is top class in our country, that it is the envy of other countries, that we have this really awesome system that we built from the ground up, that nobody or very few people are in need of access, because we provide access for them. Learning disabled kids, students who want to major in just skills, students who want to advance themselves in the STEM areas, so that we have our own research labs, we have our own scientists who are actually doing work in animal husbandry and biology, and so on and so forth. We had those in the past, where I remember when I was going to Brownstone Community College, and we went to Minard Estate with the cows and cattle in general. They actually, Dr. Leakey actually created the red Jamaica red, the cow. And so I don't hear anything about those developments and research and so on happening in Jamaica anymore. So we need to look at raw material and build it from the ground up, because a lot of these, we were talking the other day to Megel with Judy, and I was saying that, you know, the agricultural department in our high schools need to farm on a large scale, because these young teenagers, they can do farming. When I was growing up, I grew up on a farm. We could farm and use that as part of our curriculum, you know?
Yeah.
So we're looking at raw material, Dr. Barker.
Yeah, I think the problem I'm going to say with raw material is that we don't have natural. When we talk about raw material, in this case, the teachers that are the raw material, which is the backbone of an education system. I was reading a report produced by McKinsey about why the most successful education systems continue to be successful. And one quote was from a South Korean policy specialist that says the quality of an education system will never exceed the quality of its teachers. Yeah. So the raw material we are talking about is quality teachers. Now, Jamaica is unique in one context, because we actually have a number of colleges that produce teachers. That's their role. There are not many places in the world that still kept that from the colonial age, where you really have lots of teachers' colleges. A lot of them have now become degree granting institutions, which is an advantage, because now our teachers have degrees from the beginning. You know, in the past, they would get the postgraduate, the diploma, and then they'd go back to university to do a 2-year bachelor's in education. Jamaica now, I'd say most, and maybe all teachers will graduate with a first degree in education. So
Yes.
it steps us up to a point to meet basic criteria entry into other countries, because most of them will have a degree as an entry point. Now, the point about the raw material is this. The issue with this on a comparative raw material is that while the other one, you take it out of the ground and it's raw material, here we actually have to invest to create it. We have to put money into it to create it at a massive loss, because when the government starts off with maybe whatever is a cohort for a year, very few end up leaving the actual education system with a kind of education that will add value to the country. And from that percentage, a small proportion will become teachers. So in terms of the investment to create the raw material, my big question is, when we get to that point and our teachers get on a plane and go to a foreign country, what happened to that investment? Because even when a teacher sends the money back, they're not sending it back as a payment, for the remittance, yeah?
Yes.
And they're actually paying it back at a rate that's decided by the United States, not by us. So we are not saying any money from a teacher, this is the rate that you have to pay, because we have to recoup the loss. We don't tax them in a different way from any other money. And we have no way of tracking it. Now, back in 2003, when this became a big issue, because I told the background to it, in 2000, Berkshire Whiteman said we have too many teachers, and there was a layoff, a number of teachers. I remember that I was a teacher then, right? I wasn't affected, but there were teachers who were losing their jobs, or told that they would lose their jobs. By about 2003, this became a big issue across the Caribbean, because not only Jamaican teachers were being recruited, but across the board, they were just coming in now massively like hawks. And so the Caribbean governments got together and started to look at a way in which they could deal with this predatory behavior by these countries. There was a big secretariat that was held in 2003 to look at this matter. They agreed to research the impact, but nothing more came of it. But one of the biggest outcome of it was this idea of what Judy's talking about, the managed migration, the idea of a managed migration system, where the idea is that we're going to manage it. You're going to get involved in the actual migration and manage it. But there are some big questions that come from that, because there's a practical side to it, right? As you mentioned, a person can just get a visa and travel. They don't really need to go through the government to go and work in a foreign country. So how do you manage that? So there are some real challenges in it, but I believe in the long term, if we're going to recoup this investment, it has to come through something like that. But I don't know what the final.
We are the ones that give the visas. So we could say that we limit the number of visas per year that go out for that particular category. I mean, that's how the US works. The number of visas that we issue for any category, even to come into the country, there's limited depending on the number of people here from that country. For example, people that are from India that are applying for a green card, for example, there's so many of them here that they have a waiting list of like 15 years before their application is even reviewed, because they manage the number of people coming from each country. So to keep the number reasonable, somebody coming from Australia, for example, they come in almost immediately because they don't have a long list of Australians trying to come in. Right? They even manage the nationality of the people that are coming in, right? So those green card lotteries, most green card lotteries are not in any third world countries. They're the European countries that they want to balance and encourage them to come in, because their society is so developed that they don't need to leave, right? There's no reason to come here. So they encourage them by offering them literally a free green card. So it is most definitely possible to manage who is coming in and who is leaving. Yes, there's no question about that. But, there has to be a concerted effort between the US and the Jamaican government to, talk to them about the fact that, hey, this is what we want. There's just a certain number of, but is that to their detriment, right? Because again, they've been living off us like,
Yeah.
for such a long time.
They're not going to want to pay more now for a product that they're getting cheaper.
Exactly.
Exactly. What is their interest to not let all of our people leave, you know? And when you say, you know, Dwayne, how back in the day, you know, we used to have more programs to support us. That was in the 70s and the 60s, you know, like right after our independence, before they decided, again, this is all deliberate. In what way do they want in the world economy for Jamaica to exist? And that is a decision that happens outside of Jamaica's control to some extent, right? So the IMF was working very deliberately to kind of, I mean, there's no easier word to say, that sabotage our internal markets. Later on, it was under the Clinton administration where they kind of attacked the relationship that we had with exports directly to England, because England was said, you know, for the rest of our existence, we'd always have them to be able to export to, and that was supposed to support us. And then, you know, Chiquita Banana didn't like the fact that we were their competition. They said it was against, you know, international protocol and, you know, against the international laws. And then we lost that relationship. So there have been deliberate changes made in the, that's why I keep saying that we're a global society and we have to see ourselves that way because we're being treated that way. Global, you know, as far as Chiquita Banana goes, they want to be able to export globally. And we were interfering with their competition. Just the idea of that we used to have a really thriving agricultural community where people were actually wanted in Jamaica to eat Jamaican food. And there was an actual, what do you call it, a propaganda machine that went into place to limit or to change the opinion of Jamaican people, that they didn't even want to have local products anymore. They thought that exports or imports, sorry, were the ideal foods to have. So Canadian foods that are very popular with us, and you know, all kinds of things that we're getting from the US were the ones that we were costing more to have, you know, costing more to eat and to consume and making people more poor. But in their minds, they had lost the opinion that the products that we could produce locally were good enough, right? So we suffer from not understanding our own value in a number of levels. You know, we don't know what to, honestly, we wouldn't, even if we knew how great we were as educators and how desirable we were, we wouldn't even agree to the salaries that they're getting when they leave. We don't know. All we know is, man, it's a lot more than what I was making. But without understanding that our government doesn't have the amount of money to pay us what we, you know, what we would otherwise have on the global market because of all these other economic challenges that we've had to suffer as a result of a lot of our economic circumstances being dictated by stronger, you know, economies. So we need to know that when we leave, we can demand 100,000 US, you know, as a starting salary because of our quality, but that's not what's happening. And again, that's a post-colonial mentality. We come out thinking, yeah, we know that we're great, but we're not as good as the people that we're going to go work among. And that's the problem, because we would be able to benefit ourselves, even in the brain drain, if we knew our value. And if we knew, and if our government understood the situation better, in my opinion, they would also find a way to pay us more because they would understand that we need to stay. You need to keep them. You know, don't say, oh, well, this is how it works. No, it's not happening by happenstance. It's happening because, like Dr. Barker said earlier, that there is a plan. They prioritize the education in their societies and their government and their long-term, you know, prosperity. And that's why they're taking us in the first place. But they're not going to do it if it's not going to be economically feasible.
Yeah. So start with the mindset. As an investment or social service, we start with the mindset of the people, to change the mindset so that the narrative will change and it will trickle down into our work ethics, and so on in our parent country. Dr. Barker?
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. But I suppose the question mark here is, what kind of mindset? Are we encouraging a kind of patriotic and a kind of understanding of, I think, so there's a lot of individuality at play here. You know, I mean, there are people who will watch this discussion and say, for example, that are these people saying that if I get a chance to go overseas and I go and work in the US, I am being unfair in that sense. Why should I miss that opportunity? The key thing, people view this as an opportunity And it might seem like any attempt by the government to try and arrest this situation would mean it is curtailing the opportunity for people to get something that they would see as a prize. This is really the reality. So what we haven't done well in Jamaica is explain the economic cost of anything.
Mm.
Anything that government pays for is seen as government paid for it rather than taxpayers paid for it. And that's the problem. We really don't have a conversation about things being tax funded in Jamaica. So when we speak about going to university, I would say free healthcare. It's not free. It's taxpayer funded healthcare. We say free education. It's not free education. It is taxpayer funded education. So what people aren't seeing is the role they play in the benefit that they get, or the role they can play in providing this service. So in that sense, that is the challenge we have. The mindset in the country is not yet to understand the role that individuals can play in economic development. Now, at the moment, the Ministry of Education sits on the service side of the budget, guaranteed. And then on the other side of the budget is the side that produces revenue. I have no doubt because I've spoken to people. So because it sits on the service side, the cost is unlimited. There's no ceiling to the cost because there's no benefit that is expected to be derived financially from this service, On the other side, where you have mining or agriculture, there's an understanding that we're supposed to make a profit in this side. So if you put 100 million, you expect to see some return in the 10, 15 years. My point here is that we need to move education from the service side and put it on the revenue side. So when we put 100,000 into education, we need to be asking ourselves, what do we expect to gain in the long term financial? I guarantee that if the government of Jamaica and the people of Jamaica accept this kind of new kind of
framework
of the education, this framework, right, of the education, what will happen? When we talk about how do we manage the migration and deal with this loss of investment, they'll figure out a way. Because as you rightly said, visas, we don't really have to give them visas to go, but we can certainly have documentation that says you cannot work in another country unless you have this documentation. And that has to be given by the Ministry of Education in the sense that there must be a handshake between the New York State government and the Ministry of Education that this person is certified to work overseas. And so if teachers have to go through that process, and I know a lot of teachers will like me for this, but if they have to go through that process in order to get the certificate, like a license from the Ministry of Education, that the New York will never allow them to work, or UK, without saying, where is this document? Now the government can track who is leaving to work overseas, because even if you take a plane and go overseas, you still have to write back and ask for this document. And that is really how you begin to think, okay, do we have enough maths teachers in the country? Do we have enough English teachers in the country? Is everywhere served? Okay, we have excess resources to send overseas. Or if someone's leaving after 1 year of training, there might be an economic cost. We need people to sit down and work out what is that cost and say, is it something that they have to, the government, the New York have to pay the government of Jamaica in order to get this teacher to be released? Or is it something that the teacher has to sign on to say, I'll do 3 years, but I'll come back? I don't know. I'm not providing an answer to this. I'm just saying the way that we need to think about this has to be beyond why we can't do nothing. People have to go make our money. Everybody have to do a thing. And we can't stop the man in business. And we have to stop thinking like that. Otherwise, kids are in Jamaica that we know don't have a book to go school or a shoes to go school. Because it costs money. And if we have the money just leaking out at the other end, because we have no way of stopping people from just deciding, I'm sick and tired of what's happening here. We can make 10 times the salary overseas and just go in the US. There's another question. Why so many spaces in the US? Because it's really not a livable wage either. It's not a livable wage. It's that we can live on that wage because we decide to accept. Anyway, you know, we can go on and on this. So.
On and on. And you're right, Barker, I'm telling you, man, you're hitting the nail right on the head. Because there's so much management that can be implemented in this. It doesn't have to be like a flooded gate. It can be controlled. And looking at nation building, I talk about that phrase a whole lot, nation building, so much that I feel like it's cliche now, that we need some management systems in place to take care of the people. And we have people in there. I went to Jamaica, I talk about this. that in Jamaica itself, there is solutions to the problem there. They don't have to look outside. The solutions are right there in Jamaica for any part of the country. It doesn't have to be education alone. It can be agriculture or commerce. It can be anything, foreign affairs. The solutions are right there. So as we wind down the program, I want to ask this general question to myself too, and to all of us, is what do we say to the people, especially the ones who are in Jamaica, the teachers who are in the system, and they're thinking about the school year just started. Yeah. What do we say to them with all of this, the debate and so on, with the investment or social service? What do we say to them, even those ones who are in St. Elizabeth, in Southeast St. Elizabeth, those who are in Westmoreland, in Darlington, Westmoreland? What do we say to them? Not just the ones who are uptown. What do we say to the ones in Oracabessa, St. Mary, or in St. Anne, in Brownstown, in Green Pond, in St. James? What do we say to these ones who are struggling with 60 students in a classroom? How do we communicate to them as saying that education is an investment in the students? Education is a social service to the community and to Jamaica at large. Do you want to wind us down here, and then Dr. Barker?
What I would say to them is that you're priceless, you're invaluable. Nobody is waiting in the wings to come and take your place and to save those kids. Nobody is as dedicated and as concerned and love those children as much as you do as a teacher in those intimate communities and rural communities all over the island. You are the most valuable asset to the country. It's that work that you do as a teacher that ensures the future of the country. So take leaving very seriously, and understand that there is nothing that can fill the space that you leave, that gaping hole. I saw a video from a school. What was the name of the school? It's an alternative school.
Restoration in Trenchtown.
Yes, and a young man did a short video about how his journey during the school year last year, and that he had an excellent math teacher, and he was doing well, and he was afraid of math, and he ended up doing really well in the math class, and then she migrated. And when she migrated, he felt the pain of that loss. And he had gone to another teacher that was less experienced, and he said his grades fell all the way down. And then he ended up working with another teacher and getting the grades back up over time. But the fact is he really felt the loss, and you could hear the pain that he experienced as a result of that. And we need to understand that these individual students, they need teachers. They need people that care about them to stay and teach them, because they are our future. They're going to grow up to be, this young man is going to, if with the attention and love that a teacher gives them, to grow up and be like Dr. Dyce and Dr. Megel Barker. We need more guys like you. We need more people like this. We cannot give up on our kids. And so we have to make a point to find a way to work with our country to do better for us, so that we can actually stay and continue to support them, as many of us as we can. Don't want to cut off anybody's opportunity, but definitely think about the role that you play, and it's irreplaceable. So, thank you for your service. Anybody who is doing this work, you're doing God's work, and it's on you that the entire country stands.
Yeah, I'd echo that as well. The teachers are the victims in this, in the sense that everyone's working, and you go to work, you come home, and you work and you come home. At the end of the day, you expect a paycheck that can give you what we call a livable wage, a wage where you can self-actualize at some point, but at least have the basic needs of housing, food, be able to provide for your family, and be able to keep your family together, in order for you to survive. And the reality of it is that teachers in Jamaica aren't paid the wage that matches the level of education that they have put into reaching that point. That's a reality. I know many teachers who don't take home a lot of money. We're not going to compare it to what it is in the US because the cost of living in both countries are quite different. Yeah, and whereas you can get a Hana banana from somebody or a piece of yam from somebody and get some ackee off a tree, and you could very well get a dinner without spending any money. In the US, every dinner is paid for. Everyone. Everyone. You cannot get anything. Nobody give it anything. Or UK for that matter. So it's a different world, but the teachers are the victim. I think that the solution to what the message that we want our teachers to start doing is to think a lot more about while they're in the country, how can they get this to be fully understood? The idea that they are the building blocks. And if the conditions in the country are uninhabitable, then they are going to have to look to sacrifice themselves in another place in order to get that. And what's missing from the conversation is that kind of ground up understanding that the system needs everything. If a teacher leave, we have a gap. If a teacher stays, you're not paid well. So we need to find a solution to it. And I think what needs to be understood, I believe the solution is going to be, because of globalization, it's very hard to put restriction on labor movement. Very hard because of globalization. And Jamaica signed on to numerous protocols that says we have to allow freedom of movement of labor. It will be very difficult. But not coming in it, just going out, because it benefits the people who say sign on and you get a loan, right? So we agree to it. But perhaps the solution will be in people understanding the national picture. You know, like more of that debate about how the teachers influence the national picture in terms of if they leave, what is the impact? And so at least people can accept the debt that is owed to the national purse when they are leaving. And so when they are leaving, we're not stopping people now. But how can we create a way in which that people who leave can begin to play a role back in the national space easier, much easier? Yeah. And that can be solved by the use of technology, for example. You know, you talk about 60 kids in a classroom. You can have 100 kids in a classroom if you have a good teacher leading the learning and instructors to follow through, you know. So we need to look different, because I taught a class in Portmore, Bridgeport Comprehensive, with 54 students in it. I taught that. That was 1999. Yeah? 54 students. I'm teaching mathematics in one room that maybe in my school now somebody said that not big enough for 18 students. And that is still happening now. The second part of the point I'm making about the past to now is also this conversation happened 20 years ago about teachers migrating and leaving the country with a big gap, and nothing was done. Either to bring more knowledge to the national conversation about having that conversation, or to consider education as investment. Nothing. You just carry on until another person talks about it. So maybe we need to keep that in the national conversation and bring the people here who are writing the policies to be explain to us how they view that view of it, that framing of it as an investment rather than as a revenue earner as against a service. So that might be an interesting debate and a discussion.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, and that's is a very good point there to close off this week, Dr. Barker and Judy. Very, very good point. So guys, please reach out to us. You know, we're always here. We're doing work in Jamaica and the Caribbean and the diaspora in general. You can subscribe to our channel on YouTube, Education Solutions International TV. That's a YouTube channel, as well as go on our website. Look on our website, we have resources there, educationsolutionsinternational.org. And stay tuned for another edition of EduTALK next week, when we'll feature some important topics. This week, we talk about education as a national investment or a social service. And you will see we have practical solutions that you can actually just take and implement. And it's all about mindset. Shift your mindset mostly. If you shift your mindset, you'll see things from a different angle, from a different perspective. Dr. Barker, my co-host, I am very grateful to have your presence as usual. And yeah, and Judy, as usual, you know, you're always a part of the family of EduTALK. As a matter of fact, you didn't even introduce yourself as CFO of Education Solutions International, and Dr. Barker.
Is that F for the fun that she brings?
It should be fun too, but she deals
Is
with
it
money.
fun? Is it fun or funds?
Funds.
Oh my God.
It could be both.
Oh God.
Oh
No
my
grammar
God.
mistakes. You're all educators. None of that.
Yeah. Well, good, everybody. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll talk soon. Well, good. Take care. All right. Good. Bye, everybody.